He brought his pregnant mistress to our 10th anniversary dinner, introducing her as his business partner, while she wore my grandmother's emerald necklace. I smiled, raised my champagne glass, and said, "Congratulations on the baby, my lawyer. Has been waiting at table 12 with the divorce papers since 6 o'clock. The color drained from both their faces when Arthur stood up, briefcase in hand, as the entire restaurant turned to watch my husband realize I'd known about everything. For months. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I wasn't supposed to be sitting at the bar of Meridian Heights' most exclusive restaurant on my 10th wedding anniversary. I was supposed to be at table 7, the corner booth with the perfect view of the city skyline, celebrating a decade of marriage with my husband, Tom. Instead, I was perched on a velvet bar stool, nursing a glass of Dom Perignon and watching the most elaborate betrayal unfold right before my eyes. Tom sat across the dining room with Helena, his business partner from the law firm, the same Helena whose pregnancy glow was unmistakable even from 30 feet away. What made my blood run cold wasn't just seeing them together on our anniversary. It was the emerald necklace glinting at her throat, the Art Deco masterpiece that had belonged to my grandmother Vivian, passed down through 4 generations of strong women who had survived wars, depressions, and heartbreak. The same necklace Tom had convinced me to let him store in his office, safe for security reasons, 6 months ago. My fingers tightened around the champagne flute as I watched Helena lean forward, her hand resting protectively over what was clearly a 5-month baby bump beneath her flowing silk dress. Tom's eyes were bright with an excitement I hadn't seen directed toward me in years, his hand covering hers on the table as they whispered intimately over their appetizers. "Mrs. Calloway?" The voice belonged to Marcus, the maitre d' I'd known, since my corporate event planning days. "Your usual table is ready whenever you'd like." I turned from the devastating scene before me, managing a smile that felt like glass. "Actually, Marcus, I think I'll stay here at the bar tonight. Better view of the entertainment." He followed my gaze, his professional composure faltering slightly when he recognized my husband. "Oh, I see. Would you like me to—" "No need," I interrupted gently. "Everything is exactly as it should be." And it was. Because while Tom thought he was orchestrating the perfect anniversary surprise, bringing his pregnant lover to humiliate me in public, I had been 3 steps ahead for months. Every late-night strategy session, every weekend client retreat, every mysterious charge on our credit card had been carefully documented by the private investigator I'd hired after finding Helena's earring in Tom's Mercedes. Arthur Blackwood, my divorce attorney and old family friend, was seated at table 12 as planned, his briefcase containing copies of Tom's falsified expense reports, the photographs of his secret apartment lease, and the DNA test results I'd obtained through less than conventional means. Helena's pregnancy wasn't just an affair. It was the final piece of evidence I needed to prove Tom's systematic financial fraud against our joint accounts to fund his double life. I thought back to 3 hours earlier when I'd received Tom's text. Running late had to bring Helena to discuss the Morrison merger. "You understand. Happy anniversary, sweetheart. You understand." The same phrase he'd used to explain away a year of suspicious behavior. Late nights, weekend trips, the gradual withdrawal of affection that I'd attributed to work stress. I'd been the understanding wife, the supportive partner, the woman who managed our social life while he built his career. What I hadn't understood was that he'd been building it with another woman, using our money to finance their future while planning to leave me with nothing. But Tom had underestimated his wife. The same organizational skills that had made me the most sought-after event planner in the city had served me well in documenting his betrayal. Every receipt, every inconsistency, every lie had been cataloged with the precision that once coordinated million-dollar corporate galas. The irony wasn't lost on me that he'd chosen Meridian Heights for this humiliation. This was where we'd had our first date, where he'd proposed, where we'd celebrated every major milestone of our marriage. The crystal chandeliers, the cream silk wallpaper, the soft piano music. It was all exactly as it had been 10 years ago when I thought I was marrying my soulmate. I watched as the sommelier approached their table with the wine I recognized, a 2008 Bordeaux we'd shared on our honeymoon in France. Tom was making a show of tasting it, explaining something to Helena that made her laugh, her free hand unconsciously stroking her belly. The gesture was so natural, so protective, that it told me everything about how long this relationship had been developing. My phone buzzed with a text from Arthur. In position. Are you ready? I glanced at my watch. 8:15. Tom would be ordering dessert soon. He was nothing if not predictable in his routines. It was time. Rising from the bar stool, I smoothed down my black cocktail dress, the one I'd bought specifically for tonight's confrontation. My grandmother's earrings caught the light as I moved. The only pieces of her jewelry collection Tom hadn't convinced me to secure in his office. Vivian would have appreciated the poetic justice of what was about to unfold. As I crossed the restaurant floor, I caught the attention of several other diners. The Meridian Heights crowd was small and gossipy. By tomorrow morning, the entire social circle would know what had happened tonight. Tom's reputation as both a lawyer and a husband would be in ruins, which was exactly what he deserved. Darling. Tom's voice carried that false heartiness I'd grown to despise as I approached their table. Perfect timing. Helena, I'd like you to meet my wife, Grace. Grace, this is Helena Morrison from the firm. Helena extended her hand with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She knew exactly who I was, just as she knew the significance of the necklace she was wearing. It's lovely to finally meet you, Grace. Tom speaks of you so often. I shook her hand, noting the way Tom shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I'm sure he does. And congratulations on your pregnancy. You're glowing. The words hung in the air, like a loaded gun. Helena's smile faltered, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach, while Tom's face went through a fascinating array of expressions: surprise, panic, and then that practiced lawyer composure. I'm sorry? Helena's voice was barely above a whisper. Oh, didn't Tom tell you I knew? I smiled brightly, settling into the empty chair at their table without invitation. About the baby? The apartment on 5th Street? The joint bank account you opened last month? No? How unlike him to keep secrets. That's when I raised my champagne glass and delivered the words that would end my marriage and begin my new life. Congratulations on the baby. My lawyer has been waiting at table 12 with the divorce papers since 6 o'clock. And as Arthur Blackwood stood up across the restaurant, briefcase in hand, I watched my husband's world begin to crumble exactly as he had planned mine to. But let me step back and paint you the picture of what Tom was destroying, with his calculated betrayal. Because you see, the life he was so casually dismantling had taken me 15 years to build, brick by careful brick, into something I'd never imagined possible when I started as a secretary at Henderson & Associates event management firm. I wasn't born into privilege. My childhood was spent in a cramped apartment above my mother's flower shop in the old part of town, where the rent was cheap and the dreams were carefully rationed. My mother, Edith, worked 16-hour days arranging funeral wreaths and wedding bouquets, her hands perpetually stained with green stems and rose thorns. She wore my grandmother Vivian's emerald necklace only on special occasions, graduations, my wedding day, Christmas Eve, treating it like the family treasure it was. This necklace has seen 4 generations of Caldwell women through their hardest moments, she used to tell me while clasping it around her throat before church. Your great-grandmother wore it when she testified in court to save our family farm. Your grandmother wore it to her job interviews during the war when she had to support 3 children alone. I wore it the day I signed the lease for this shop. Someday, Grace, you'll understand what real strength looks like, and you'll wear it too. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By the time I turned 25, I understood. I'd clawed my way from Henderson's reception desk to junior coordinator to senior planner, each promotion, earned through 18-hour days and an attention to detail that bordered on obsessive. My breakthrough came when I single-handedly saved the Pemberton Industries annual gala after their lead planner suffered a nervous breakdown 3 days before the event. I coordinated vendors, managed celebrities, and transformed a potential disaster into the most talked-about corporate event of the year. That's where I met Tom. He was corporate counsel for Pemberton Industries, and I watched him work the room with the confidence of a man who'd never questioned his place in the world. Where I had fought for every opportunity, Tom seemed to effortlessly collect them. Harvard, law degree, partnership track at Morrison, Keller and Associates, family connections that opened doors I didn't even know existed. When he approached me at the end of that successful evening, champagne glass in hand and that devastating smile I'd later learn he used on juries, I felt like Cinderella being noticed by the prince. "You're remarkable," he said, and I believed him because I wanted to. I've never seen anyone handle crisis management like that. You turned chaos into art. Our courtship was a whirlwind of upscale restaurants, weekend trips to his family's lake, house and integration into a social circle I'd only glimpsed from behind vendor tables. Tom introduced me as his brilliant event planner, showing me off like a prized acquisition. I convinced myself it was love, but looking back, I wonder if I was just another asset he was acquiring. The beautiful, accomplished wife who could manage his social calendar while he focused on his career. The proposal came after 8 months of dating, at Meridian Heights on a snowy February evening. He'd reserved the same corner table where he sat tonight with Helena, and I remembered how my hands shook as he opened the ring box. The diamond was enormous, ostentatious in a way that felt foreign to me but that I assumed I'd grow into. "Grace Caldwell," he said, taking my hand across the table. "Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me?" I said yes without hesitation, tears streaming down my face, believing every word. Our wedding was featured in 3 different society magazines. I wore my grandmother's emerald necklace as my something old, the antique piece creating a stunning contrast against my silk gown. Tom had insisted on hiring the most expensive wedding planner in the city, despite my protestations that I could coordinate our own event. "This is our day to be guests, not hosts," he'd argued, and I'd relented, touched by what I interpreted as romantic consideration. The early years of our marriage were golden, or at least they seemed that way through the lens of my gratitude. Tom supported my decision to leave Henderson and Associates and start my own company, Caldwell Events. He helped me navigate the legal aspects of incorporation, introduced me to potential clients, and celebrated each milestone as if it were his own achievement. By our 5th anniversary, Caldwell Events was planning galas for Fortune 500 companies, charity fundraisers that raised millions, and wedding celebrations that were featured in national magazines. I'd purchased our home, a restored Victorian mansion in the city's historic district, with my own earnings, though Tom's name went on the deed alongside mine. "We're partners in everything," he'd said, and I'd believed that too. What I didn't see were the subtle ways Tom was positioning himself as the architect of my success. At social gatherings, he'd regale listeners with stories of how I helped Grace build her company, conveniently forgetting the countless nights I'd spent alone in my office, the client relationships I'd cultivated through sheer persistence, the creative vision that had set Caldwell Events apart from our competition. I also didn't notice how Tom's initial enthusiasm for my career began to wane, as his own ambitions grew more consuming. His goal of making senior partner became an obsession that colored every conversation, every social interaction, every decision about our future. Weekend trips became networking opportunities. Dinner parties became strategic gatherings. Even our anniversary celebrations became chances for Tom to court potential clients. By our 8th year of marriage, I realized I'd become a supporting character in my husband's story. My role was to look beautiful at firm events, to host dinner parties that advanced his career, and to be understanding when his work demanded increasingly long hours and frequent travel. When I tried to discuss having children, a conversation we'd been putting off year after year, Tom would redirect to his partnership timeline. "Once I make senior partner, we'll have more stability for a family," he'd promise, and I'd nod along, pushing down my own desires for the greater good of our shared future. Except, as I now understood, Tom hadn't been planning a shared future. At all. While I was building my business and maintaining our social life, he'd been building an entirely separate existence with Helena Morrison, the ambitious junior associate who'd joined his firm 2 years ago. The same Helena who was now 5 months pregnant with the child I'd been waiting 10 years to have. Tonight, watching Tom perform the role of devoted partner with another woman while she wore my family's most precious heirloom, I realized the devastating truth. I hadn't just been betrayed by my husband. I'd been strategically displaced, carefully, maneuvered out of my own life so thoroughly that Tom actually believed he could bring his pregnant mistress to our anniversary dinner and somehow make it my fault. But Tom had made one critical miscalculation. The same woman who had built a $1 million business from nothing, who had learned to navigate corporate politics and high-stakes negotiations, who had earned every opportunity through intelligence and determination rather than inherited privilege, that woman wasn't going to disappear quietly into the background of his new narrative. That woman had been planning her own strategic move for months, and Tom was about to discover just how formidable an opponent his understanding wife could be. Thutjo. Moment that shattered my world had happened 3 months ago on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. I remember it with crystalline clarity, because it was the day I stopped being the trusting wife and became the woman who would orchestrate tonight's reckoning. I was rushing out to meet a client when I realized I'd forgotten my laptop charger. Tom had already left for the office, or so I thought, so I used my key to enter his home study to borrow his. That's when I saw it. Helena's pearl earring glinting from beneath his desk chair, the same distinctive Mikimoto piece she'd worn to the firm's Christmas party just 2 months earlier. My hands trembled as I picked it up, the smooth weight of the cultured pearl solid evidence of what my heart had been whispering for weeks. This wasn't a piece that fell off during a brief business meeting. This was intimate jewelry, the kind that only comes off when someone is getting very comfortable in a private space. I stood there in Tom's study, surrounded by his law books and framed diplomas, holding another woman's earring and feeling my entire reality shift beneath my feet. The leather chair where he sat every evening returning calls, the desk where he'd helped me review contracts for my business, the family photos lining the shelves. Everything was contaminated now by the knowledge of what had happened in this space. My phone rang, startling me back to the present. It was my assistant, Maeve, reminding me about the Morrison Industries consultation meeting. Morrison Industries, Helena's family company. Tom had connected me to this account 6 months ago, claiming it was a favor to help expand my corporate client base. Now I understood it had been something else entirely, a way for him to legitimize his relationship with Helena while using my business as cover for their meetings. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I told Maeve, my voice surprisingly steady as I slipped Helena's earring into my purse. "And Maeve, could you do me a favor and pull all our correspondence files for the Morrison account? I want to review everything before the meeting." That consultation meeting became the most surreal hour of my professional life. Helena Morrison sat across from me in the conference room of her family's textile empire, discussing color schemes and catering preferences for their annual charity gala, while I tried to reconcile this poised businesswoman with the woman whose earring was burning a hole in my purse. She was stunning in a way I'd never fully appreciated from across crowded firm events, tall and willowy with the kind of effortless elegance that comes from generations of privilege. Her honey-colored hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, and she wore a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries. But what struck me most was her confidence, the way she commanded the room with casual authority. "I want this event to be memorable," she said, leaning forward with enthusiasm that seemed genuine, something that showcases our company's commitment to education reform. "Tom mentioned you have experience with nonprofit galas?" The casual way she said his name, not Mr. Calloway or your husband, just Tom, told me everything I needed to know about the level of intimacy between them. I forced myself to maintain professional composure while every instinct screamed at me to confront her immediately. "Yes, I've coordinated several education-focused events," I replied, taking notes, "and playing my role perfectly. The key is creating an emotional connection between the donors and the cause. Personal stories, visual presentations, direct impact demonstrations." We spent an hour discussing logistics while I studied her every gesture, looking for clues about how long this betrayal had been developing. She was comfortable, relaxed, treating me with the kind of professional courtesy you'd show any vendor. There was no guilt, no discomfort, no recognition that she was sitting across from the wife of her lover. That realization hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't even a person to her. I was just an obstacle to be maneuvered around, a business arrangement to be managed. Tom had compartmentalized our marriage so completely that Helena could sit in my conference room, planning an event with my company, while wearing my husband's promises on her finger. Yes, I'd noticed the delicate band on her right hand, too new and expensive to be anything but significant. After she left, I sat alone in my office and made the phone call that would change everything. Leon Hastings had been my college roommate's older brother, a private investigator who specialized in matrimonial cases. I'd helped him with his wedding 5 years earlier, and he'd always told me to call if I ever needed anything. "Grace? What?" "A surprise." Leon's gravelly voice carried both warmth and immediate concern. "Everything okay?" "I need your help," I said simply. "And I need it to be completely confidential." The meeting with Leon the next day was conducted in a coffee shop across town, far from any place Tom and I might be recognized. Leon was exactly as I remembered, mid-40s, graying at the temples, with the kind of lived-in face that suggested he'd seen every kind of human betrayal imaginable. "Tell me what you suspect," he said after we'd settled into a corner booth with our drinks. I showed him Helena's earring and explained about the Morrison Industries connection. "I think my husband is having an affair, but I need to know the scope. How long, how serious, and whether there are financial implications I should be aware of." Leon studied the earring, then looked at me with something like admiration. "Most people come to me emotional, angry, ready to confront immediately. You're thinking strategically." "I learned a long time ago that emotions don't win negotiations," I replied. "If Tom is betraying me, I want to know everything before I decide how to respond." "Smart woman. This kind of investigation usually takes 4 to 6 weeks for a complete picture. You'll need to act normally during that time. No confrontations, no changes in behavior that might alert him. Can you do that?" I thought about going home to Tom that evening, sitting across from him at dinner, sharing our bed, maintaining the facade of our marriage while he was building a future with another woman. It would be the hardest performance of my life. "Yes," I said. "I can do that." Those 6 weeks were a masterclass in psychological endurance. I became a student of my own marriage, analyzing every late night, every weekend, emergency, every shift, in Tom's routine with new understanding. Leon's reports arrived weekly, each one adding another layer to the devastating picture. Helena wasn't just Tom's lover. She was his partner in every sense. They'd been apartment hunting in the city's most exclusive neighborhoods. They'd opened joint accounts under a shell company name. Most damaging of all, Tom had been gradually transferring assets from our shared holdings into accounts Helena could access, preparing for what appeared to be a strategic divorce designed to leave me with as little as possible. The financial betrayal was almost worse than the emotional one. Tom wasn't just cheating on me. He was stealing from me, liquidating the life we'd built together to fund his new beginning. The Victorian house I'd purchased with my own earnings was mortgaged to the hilt. Business accounts I'd thought were secure had been systematically drained through investment opportunities that existed only on paper. But the final revelation came in Leon's last report, the one that transformed my hurt and anger into cold, calculating fury. Helena was pregnant. 3 months along, according to the medical records Leon had managed to access through contacts I preferred not to know about. The timeline meant the affair had been going on for at least 6 months, possibly longer. Tom was going to be a father, with another woman while I'd spent a decade waiting for him to be ready for children with me. That night, I sat in my office long after my staff had gone home, staring at Leon's final report and feeling something fundamental shift inside me. The grieving wife was gone, replaced by a woman who understood exactly what kind of war she was fighting. I picked up the phone and called Arthur Blackwood. Arthur? It's Grace Calloway. I need the best divorce attorney in the city, and I need someone who understands complex asset protection. Most importantly, I need someone who can work quickly and quietly. Grace. Arthur's voice was gentle but alert. What's happened? My husband thinks he's been very clever about hiding his affair and his financial manipulations. I'm going to show him that he's not nearly as smart as he believes himself to be. That conversation began the most intensive 3 months of my life. While Tom continued his performance as the devoted husband planning our anniversary celebration, I was building an airtight case that would expose every lie, every theft, every betrayal he thought he'd so carefully hidden. Tonight was simply the grand finale of a plan that had been months in the making. Tom thought he was bringing his pregnant mistress to humiliate me. What he didn't realize was that he was bringing her to witness his complete and utter destruction. Some lessons, after all, are best taught in public. The first few days after finding Helena's earring were a study in human psychology, specifically, how the mind protects itself from truths too devastating to immediately accept. Even with the physical evidence burning in my jewelry box, I found myself creating elaborate alternate explanations for what I'd discovered. Maybe Helena had been to our house for a legitimate business meeting. Maybe the earring had fallen during a conference call in Tom's study. Maybe there was an innocent explanation that my suspicious mind was twisting into something sinister. I desperately wanted to believe these possibilities, clinging to them like a drowning woman clutches driftwood. The morning after my discovery, I made Tom his usual breakfast: scrambled eggs with chives from our garden, fresh orange juice, coffee, exactly the way he liked it. I watched him read the financial section of the newspaper, the same routine we'd followed for 10 years, and tried to reconcile this familiar domestic scene with the implications of what I'd found. "You're quiet this morning," Tom observed, glancing up from his paper. "Everything all right?" The casual concern in his voice almost broke me. This was the man who knew I was allergic to shellfish, who remembered to buy my favorite tea when he traveled, who had held me through my mother's funeral. How could this same person be capable of the betrayal I suspected? "Just thinking about the Morrison Industries event," I replied, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "It's a big account." Tom smiled, that warm expression I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "Helena mentioned how impressed she was with your initial proposals. She said you really understood their vision." The way he said her name, with that slight softening of tone that spoke of intimacy, sent a chill through me. But I forced myself to smile back, to play the part of the unsuspecting wife. "She seems very passionate about the company's charitable work," I said, testing the waters. "She is," Tom agreed, his eyes lighting up with what I now recognized as the glow of a man discussing someone he cared deeply about. "Helena has this amazing vision for corporate social responsibility. She's trying to revolutionize how her family's company engages with the community. He spoke about her for another 10 minutes, her innovative ideas, her dedication, her intelligence. Each compliment felt like a small knife wound, but I absorbed them all, filing away every detail for later analysis. By the time he left for work, kissing my cheek with the same absent affection he'd shown for months, I had a clearer picture of just how invested he was in Helena Morrison. But knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally are two very different things. That afternoon, I found myself standing in our bedroom, staring at our wedding photos lined up on the dresser. There we were on our honeymoon in Tuscany, laughing over wine at a small trattoria. There was our 5th anniversary trip to Napa, Tom's arm around me as we posed in front of a vineyard. Each image told the story of a marriage I'd believed was real, solid, permanent. I picked up our wedding portrait, studying Tom's face for signs of the duplicity I now suspected. But all I saw was the man I'd married, confident, handsome, gazing at me with what had seemed like genuine love. Had it all been an act from the beginning? Or had something changed along the way, some moment when his feelings shifted and he began to see me as an obstacle rather than a partner? The questions consumed me, but the answers felt impossible to reach. I was caught between desperate hope and growing certainty, my rational mind warring with my wounded heart. 3 days after finding the earring, I did something I'd never done in 10 years of marriage. I went through Tom's personal belongings while he was at work. The invasion of privacy felt like a betrayal of everything our relationship was supposed to represent, but I was past caring about theoretical trust when faced with concrete evidence of deception. His home office yielded little. Tom was too careful. A lawyer to leave obvious evidence lying around. But his bedroom dresser told a different story. Tucked beneath his collection of cufflinks, I found a small velvet box containing a woman's delicate gold bracelet. The inscription on the inside made my stomach lurch. To my darling H, all my love, T. I sat on our bed holding this piece of jewelry Tom had bought for another woman and felt the last of my denial crumble away. The H could only stand for Helena, and the romantic inscription left no room for innocent interpretation. This wasn't a business relationship or a friendly colleagueship. This was a love affair, complete with intimate gifts and secret promises. But even then, even with undeniable proof in my hands, part of me wanted to confront Tom immediately, to give him a chance to explain, to hope that somehow this could all be resolved with honest conversation and renewed commitment to our marriage. The trusting wife in me whispered that 10 years of partnership deserved at least that much consideration. I actually picked up the phone to call him that afternoon, my finger hovering over his number while I rehearsed what I might say. Tom, I found Helena's earring in your study. I found the bracelet you bought her. Please tell me there's an explanation that doesn't mean our marriage is over. But something stopped me. Maybe intuition. Maybe self-preservation. Maybe just the strategic, thinking that had served me well in business. If Tom was capable of maintaining an affair while planning our anniversary celebration, if he could lie to my face every morning over breakfast, then he was capable of lying his way out of a confrontation. A skilled lawyer could probably explain away the earring and the bracelet, make me doubt my own perceptions, convince me I was being paranoid and suspicious. Instead, I carefully replaced the bracelet where I'd found it and made a different kind of call. Leon, it's Grace Caldwell. I know this might sound strange, but I need to ask you about hiring a private investigator. Even as I spoke the words, part of me couldn't believe this was my life. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be secretly investigating my own husband, I would have been horrified at the suggestion. Marriage was supposed to be built on trust, communication, partnership. The idea of spying on a spouse seemed like something that happened to other people whose relationships were fundamentally flawed. But there I was, planning a covert investigation into the man I'd shared a bed with for 10 years. The man who still kissed me goodbye every morning and asked about my day every evening. The cognitive dissonance was almost unbearable. That night, as Tom and I had dinner together, I studied his face for signs of guilt or discomfort. But he seemed perfectly at ease, discussing his cases, asking about my work, sharing plans for our upcoming anniversary. If I hadn't known about Helena's earring and the bracelet, I would never have suspected anything was wrong. I was thinking. About our anniversary dinner, he said over dessert. Maybe we should try somewhere new this year instead of our usual place. The suggestion sent a chill through me. Was he already planning to bring Helena? Was our traditional anniversary location too intimate for his comfort now that he was living a double life? I like our usual traditions, I replied carefully. There's something to be said for consistency. Tom nodded, but I caught a flicker of something, disappointment, relief, across his face. Of course, you're right, Meridian Heights it is. Later, that night, lying next to him in our bed, I listened to his steady breathing and wondered how many lies he'd told me in recent months. How many times had he claimed to be working late while he was actually with Helena? How many business trips had been romantic getaways? How many "I love you" had been empty words designed to maintain his cover story? The questions tormented me, but they also crystallized my resolve. I couldn't confront Tom with incomplete information, couldn't risk giving him the opportunity to cover his tracks or manipulate the situation to his advantage. I needed to know everything: the full scope of his betrayal, the extent of his deception, the true nature of his relationship with Helena. Only then could I decide how to respond, how to protect myself, and how to ensure that justice was served. The naive wife who had found Helena's earring was already disappearing, replaced by a woman who understood that some battles could only be won through careful preparation and strategic thinking. Tom had no idea what kind of opponent he'd created with his betrayal, but he was about to find out. Leon Hastings turned out to be everything I'd hoped for in a private investigator: methodical, discreet, and utterly without judgment about the messy realities of human relationships. Our second meeting took place in his modest office above a coffee shop on the outskirts of downtown, far from the legal district where Tom might spot us together. I've done some preliminary research, Leon said, sliding a manila folder across his desk. Your husband has been very careful, but not quite as clever as he thinks he is. The folder contained photographs that made my stomach clench. Tom and Helena entering a boutique hotel on 5th Street. Tom and Helena sharing lunch at a small cafe I'd never heard of. Tom and Helena walking hand in hand through Riverside Park, like any other couple in love. The timestamps showed these encounters had been happening for months, during times when Tom had told me he was in depositions or client meetings. The hotel visits happened twice a week, Leon explained matter-of-factly. Always the same room, always booked under the name Thomas Morrison. He's using her family name, which suggests either arrogance or stupidity. I studied the photographs with the same attention to detail I brought to event planning contracts. In every image, Tom looked relaxed, happy in a way I hadn't seen directed toward me in years. Helena glowed with the kind of contentment that comes from being cherished, adored, prioritized. They looked like a couple planning a future together. What about financial records? I asked, setting the photos aside. Leon's expression grew more serious. That's where it gets interesting. Your husband has been systematically moving assets out of joint accounts and into ones Helena can access. He's also been using your business credit line to fund what appear to be personal expenses, hotel rooms, jewelry purchases, even a down payment on a condo in Helena's name. The betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. Tom wasn't just cheating on me emotionally and physically. He was stealing from me financially, using my own business success to fund his affair. The calculating nature of it took my breath away. How much are we talking about? I managed to ask. Close to 200,000 so far, Leon replied. And that's just what I've been able to trace in the past week. If this has been going on for months, the total could be much higher. $200,000. Money I'd earned through 15-hour days and weekend events, through building relationships and delivering flawless experiences for demanding clients. Money I'd trusted Tom to help manage as my partner in life and business. The violation felt almost worse than the affair itself. There's something else, Leon continued, pulling out another set of documents. I've been monitoring their communications through some creative means. They're not just planning a future together, they're actively planning to dismantle your current life. He showed me printed emails between Tom and Helena discussing strategy for their transition. The clinical language they used to describe the end of my marriage was chilling in its calculation. They discussed the optimal timing for Tom to file for divorce, how to minimize my claim on joint assets, and most devastatingly, their excitement about starting fresh together once the situation with Grace is resolved. The situation with Grace. That's what I'd become in my own marriage. A situation to be resolved, a problem to be managed and eliminated. But the email that shattered me completely was one from Helena to Tom discussing their unborn child. I can't wait for little Thomas or Helena to meet their daddy properly, she'd written. No more hiding, no more pretending. Just our perfect little family. They'd already named their baby. They were building a family while systematically destroying mine. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I need copies of everything, I told Leon, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Every photograph, every financial record, every email. And I need you to keep monitoring them. Leon nodded approvingly. Most people in your situation want to confront immediately, but that usually just drives the betrayal underground. You're thinking like a strategist. I learned strategic thinking from my husband, I replied with bitter irony. It seems fitting to use those lessons against him. Over the following weeks, Leon's reports painted an increasingly detailed picture of Tom and Helena's relationship. They weren't just lovers, they were partners in every sense, planning a life together with the same attention to detail Tom had, once brought to our marriage. They'd already looked at private schools for their unborn child. They'd discussed vacation homes and investment strategies. Helena had even been trying on wedding dresses, though they couldn't legally marry until Tom divorced me. The most painful discovery was that Tom had been sharing intimate details of our marriage with Helena, turning our private moments into entertainment for his mistress. Leon had captured conversations where Tom mocked my obsessive event planning, my needy desire for children, my provincial background compared to Helena's sophisticated upbringing. Every insecurity I'd ever shared with him in confidence had become ammunition in his emotional affair. But perhaps most importantly, Leon's investigation revealed the timeline of their relationship. The affair had begun nearly a year ago, shortly after Helena joined Morrison, Keller and Associates as a junior partner. The progression from professional colleagues to lovers had been swift, but the evolution from lovers to conspirators planning my downfall had taken months of careful orchestration. They'd been patient, methodical, and devastatingly thorough in their betrayal. The pregnancy was planned, Leon informed me during one of our weekly meetings. I found emails discussing fertility timing and prenatal vitamins. This wasn't an accident that forced them to make difficult choices. They chose to have a child together while Tom was still married to you. That revelation was perhaps the most painful of all. While I'd been respecting Tom's repeated insistence that we wait to start a family, he'd been actively creating one with another woman. Every "not yet" and "let's wait until my career is more stable" had been a lie designed to keep me from pursuing the motherhood I'd wanted for years. I began to understand that Tom's betrayal wasn't impulsive or accidental. It was a calculated campaign to replace me with Helena, while maximizing his financial advantage in the transition. He'd been using our anniversary dinner planning as cover for apartment hunting with his pregnant mistress. He'd been transferring assets while helping me review business contracts. He'd been lying to my face every single day while building a secret life that would eventually make me irrelevant. But Tom had made one critical error in his calculations. He'd underestimated the woman he was betraying. The same skills that had built my business from nothing, attention to detail, strategic thinking, relationship management, and an absolute refusal to accept failure, were now focused entirely on ensuring his downfall. While Tom thought he was manipulating an unsuspecting wife, he was actually giving a master strategist months to prepare the perfect counterstrike. Leon's final report, delivered exactly 3 months after our first meeting, contained enough evidence to destroy Tom's legal career, his relationship with Helena, and his carefully planned financial future. Bank records, photographs, emails, recorded conversations, and documented fraud. Everything needed to ensure that Tom's betrayal would cost him far more than he'd ever imagined possible. "What's your next move?" Leon asked as I reviewed the comprehensive file. I looked at the calendar on his office wall. Our anniversary was exactly 2 weeks away. Tom had already made dinner reservations at Meridian Heights, though he didn't know I was aware of his plan to bring Helena instead of celebrating with me. He thought he was orchestrating the perfect humiliation, a public declaration that I was being replaced. Instead, he was walking directly into the trap I'd been preparing for months. "My next move," I said, closing the file with a sense of finality, "is to give my husband exactly the anniversary surprise he deserves. Some gifts, after all, are best delivered in person." To understand why my grandmother's emerald necklace meant everything to me, and why Tom's casual theft of it for his mistress represented the ultimate violation, you need to know the story of the women who wore it before me. Because this wasn't just jewelry. It was a talisman of survival, passed down through 4 generations of Caldwell women who had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. The necklace was crafted in 1918 for my great-great-grandmother, Isabella Caldwell, as a wedding gift from her husband before he shipped out to fight in the Great War. The emeralds were modest by today's standards, but they represented every penny of savings from their small farm outside the city. Isabella wore it once, on their wedding day, before carefully wrapping it away for safekeeping. When word came that her husband had died in the trenches of France, Isabella was 22 years old, pregnant, and facing the loss of their farm to creditors. The necklace could have been sold to cover debts, but Isabella chose a different path. She wore it to the bank when she negotiated an extension on their loan, to the courthouse when she fought to retain ownership of their land, and to every business meeting as she built a small but successful dairy operation. "The emeralds gave me courage," she used to tell my great-grandmother. "When men tried to dismiss me as just another war widow, I touched this necklace and remembered I was the wife of a man who died for his beliefs. That made me worthy of respect." Isabella passed the necklace to her daughter, my great-grandmother Rose, in 1943 when Rose's own husband was called to serve in World War II. But Rose's story was different. Her husband came home, but the war had changed him. He struggled with what we now know was PTSD, drinking heavily and unable to hold steady work. Rose kept their family afloat by taking in sewing, working as a seamstress for wealthy families in the city. She wore the emerald necklace to every consultation, every fitting, every business negotiation. "It reminded me that Caldwell women don't give up," she told my grandmother years later. "When things got dark, I'd touch these stones and remember Isabella fighting for the farm. It gave me strength to keep going." The necklace carried Rose through 15 years of financial instability, through her husband's eventual recovery and their renewal of their marriage, through building a reputation that eventually allowed her to open her own small tailoring shop. When she passed it to my grandmother Vivian in 1962, it came with stories of resilience that had already spanned 2 generations. Vivian's trials were different, but no less challenging. She wore the necklace the day she left an abusive first marriage, taking only her young daughter, my mother, and starting over with nothing. She wore it to job interviews when being a divorced woman made her unemployable at most respectable establishments. She wore it the day she married my grandfather, a kind man who accepted both her and my mother as his family. This necklace has seen every kind of courage, Vivian told me when I was old enough to understand. The courage to fight for what's yours, the courage to start over, the courage to love again after betrayal. Each stone holds a story of a woman who refused to be defeated. My mother, Edith, inherited the necklace in 1979 when Vivian passed away suddenly from a heart attack. At that time, my mother was struggling to keep her small flower shop afloat during an economic recession that had devastated small businesses. My father had been laid off from his construction job, and they were facing bankruptcy. Mom wore the necklace to the bank when she renegotiated their business loan, to the wholesale markets when she fought for better pricing on her flowers, and to the courthouse when creditors tried to force the shop into liquidation. The necklace had become more than jewelry. It was armor, a tangible connection to the strength of the women who had worn it before. I could feel them with me, Mom told me years later. Isabella's determination, Rose's persistence, Vivian's courage to start over. When I touched the emeralds, I wasn't just Edith trying to save her little flower shop. I was part of something bigger, something unbreakable. The shop survived, thrived even. Mom built it into a successful business that supported our family through my childhood and paid for my college education. She wore the necklace to every major milestone: my high school graduation, my college acceptance, the day I started my first job at Henderson & Associates. When she passed it to me on my wedding day, the necklace carried the weight of nearly a century of women who had faced betrayal, abandonment, financial ruin, and social ostracism, and had emerged stronger. 4 generations of Caldwell women who had refused to be victims of their circumstances. "This is yours now," Mom said as she fastened the clasp around my neck in the bridal suite. "Not because you're the oldest, but because you have their spirit. You've built something from nothing, just like they did. You've fought for your dreams when others said they were impossible. When life tries to break you, and it will, remember that you carry their strength with you." I wore that necklace on, my wedding day feeling connected to every woman who had worn it before me. I thought I was marrying a man who understood the significance of family legacy, who respected the sacrifices previous generations had made to give us the life we enjoyed. But Tom had never truly understood what the necklace represented. To him, it was just expensive jewelry, a valuable asset to be cataloged and secured. When he convinced me to let him store it in his office, safe for security, I thought I was entrusting him with my family's most precious heirloom. Instead, I was giving him the ammunition he'd eventually use to inflict the cruelest possible wound. Seeing Helena wear my grandmother's emeralds at our anniversary dinner wasn't just about theft or betrayal. It was about the desecration of everything those stones represented: the courage, the resilience, the refusal to be defeated that had defined 4 generations of Caldwell women. Tom had given our family's legacy to his pregnant mistress, like it was a trinket from a jewelry store, something purchased to mark a romantic milestone. He'd stolen not just my grandmother's necklace, but the stories it carried, the strength it symbolized, the connection it represented to the women who had made my life possible. But as I sat in that restaurant watching Helena unconsciously touch the emeralds while she laughed at Tom's jokes, I realized something that would have made Isabella, Rose, Vivian, and Edith proud. The necklace hadn't lost its power just because it was around the wrong woman's neck. The courage, determination, and strategic intelligence of 4 generations of Caldwell women lived in me, with or without the physical reminder. Tom thought he was taking away my connection to that legacy, but he'd actually awakened it in ways I'd never experienced before. Tonight, I would reclaim more than just my grandmother's necklace. I would prove myself worthy of the inheritance it represented. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment when Tom began his transformation from loving husband to calculating stranger. It was 18 months ago, at the Morrison, Keller and Associates annual holiday party, when Helena Morrison joined the firm as their newest junior partner. I remember that night with painful clarity, because it was the last time Tom looked at me, the way he used to, with genuine pride and affection. We'd arrived together, my arm linked through his, both of us dressed in our finest. I wore a deep burgundy gown that Tom had once said made me look like a movie star, and he'd spent the entire car ride telling me how excited he was to introduce me to his new colleagues. Helena was holding court near the bar when we approached, surrounded by senior partners and their wives. She was stunning in that effortless way that comes from generations of privilege. Tall, elegant, with honey-colored hair that seemed to catch every light in the room. But what struck me most was her confidence, the way she commanded attention. Without seeming to try. "Tom!" she called out when she spotted us, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. "You must be Grace," she said, turning to me with a warm smile. "I've heard so much about your event planning company. Tom says you're absolutely brilliant at creating unforgettable experiences." I liked her immediately, which makes the betrayal that followed all the more devastating. Helena was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in hearing about my work. We talked for nearly 20 minutes about the challenges of corporate event planning, and she even asked for my business card, mentioning that Morrison Industries was looking for fresh ideas for their charity galas. What I didn't notice at the time, but now recognize with sickening clarity, was how Tom's entire demeanor changed during our conversation. The man who had been attentive and affectionate in the car became distracted, his eyes following Helena's every gesture. When she laughed at something he said, his face lit up with an intensity I hadn't seen in months. The first concrete sign of change came 2 weeks later. Tom started working late more frequently, claiming the firm was expanding and he needed to help integrate the new partners. He'd come home energized in a way that seemed disconnected from our life together, talking excitedly about new cases and strategic initiatives, without ever mentioning Helena specifically. But she was there, lurking, in the subtext of every conversation. The new junior partner has some innovative ideas about client relations. We're restructuring the corporate division, and one of the newer attorneys is leading the charge. There's this fresh perspective in the office that's really changing how we approach complex cases. I began to feel like a stranger in my own marriage, listening to Tom describe a work life that seemed more vibrant and exciting than anything we shared at home. When I tried to engage him about his day, his responses became perfunctory, distracted. The man who had once asked detailed questions about my events and clients now seemed to barely hear me when I spoke. The changes were subtle at first. A new cologne, later nights at the office, weekend work sessions that couldn't be interrupted. Tom claimed the firm was preparing for a major expansion, and I believed him because I wanted to. I'd built my own business and understood the demands of professional growth. I made excuses for his absence, rationalized his distraction, and convinced myself that this was just a temporary phase. 3 months after the holiday party, Tom suggested I should handle Helena's Morrison Industries account personally. "She specifically requested you," he said over breakfast, not quite meeting my eyes. "She was impressed by your professionalism at the party." I was flattered and excited about landing such a prestigious client, never suspecting that my husband was orchestrating business meetings between his wife and his mistress. Every consultation with Helena became another opportunity for Tom to ask detailed questions about our interactions, to learn more about her preferences and opinions under the guise of supporting my business. The summer brought more dramatic changes. Tom started taking weekend trips for client development, claiming the firm was courting major accounts that required face-to-face relationship building. He'd return from these trips rejuvenated, almost giddy, talking about new opportunities and exciting prospects for the future. Our own relationship began to feel like an afterthought. Date nights became infrequent, then non-existent. Our conversations grew stilted, focused on logistics rather than connection. The physical intimacy that had once been natural and frequent became forced, then sporadic, then practically absent. When I tried to address the growing distance between us, Tom had ready explanations. The firm was demanding. Partnership decisions were looming. The legal field was becoming more competitive. He needed to focus on securing our financial future. Every concern I raised was deflected with seemingly reasonable justifications that left me feeling selfish for wanting more attention from my own husband. The most painful part was watching Tom become a stranger who happened to share my name and address. The man who had once been my closest confidant began treating me like a business associate. Polite, professional, but emotionally distant. He remembered important dates and obligations, maintained our social appearances, and continued to share household responsibilities, but the warmth, the intimacy, the partnership that had defined our marriage simply evaporated. By our 9th anniversary last year, Tom was going through the motions of our relationship with the same efficiency he brought to legal contracts. He made reservations at our usual restaurant, bought flowers, and said all the right things, but I felt like he was performing a role rather than celebrating our marriage. The distance between us had become a chasm I didn't know how to bridge. I threw myself into my work, building Caldwell Events into an even more successful enterprise, partly because I genuinely loved what I did, and partly because professional achievement was the only area of my life where I still felt valued and successful. Tom praised my business accomplishments with the same detached approval he might show for a colleague's promotion. Proud, but not personally invested. The cruelest irony is that I spent months blaming myself for the deterioration of our marriage. I wondered if I was too focused on my career, too demanding of his time, too needy for emotional connection. I read marriage books, suggested couples therapy, and tried to recreate the romance we'd once shared. Every effort was met with polite appreciation but no real engagement. Now I understand that Tom wasn't capable of genuine engagement because he was already emotionally committed elsewhere. While I was fighting to save our marriage, he was building a new life with Helena. Every late night, every weekend trip, every distracted conversation was part of his systematic withdrawal from our relationship and investment in his future with her. The man I'd married hadn't just stopped loving me. He'd actively been replacing me, methodically transferring his emotional and financial resources to another woman while maintaining the facade of our marriage. By the time I found Helena's earring in his study, Tom had already been living a double life for over a year. What devastates me most is realizing that while I was desperately trying to reconnect with my husband, he was probably sharing stories of my efforts with Helena, perhaps even mocking my attempts to salvage something he'd already decided to discard. The woman fighting to save her marriage had become entertainment for the couple planning to destroy it. But Tom's careful, calculated betrayal had one unintended consequence. It created the very opponent who would ensure his complete downfall. Leon Zaye. Investigation had already revealed the affair and the financial theft, but what came next shattered any remaining illusions I had about the man I'd married. The deeper we dug, the more we uncovered a web of betrayals so comprehensive and calculated that it took my breath away. The first bombshell came when Leon managed to access Tom's private email account through methods I chose not to question too closely. What we found there wasn't just correspondence with Helena. It was a detailed archive of Tom's systematic deception spanning nearly 2 years. "Grace, you need to see this," Leon said during one of our weekly meetings, his usually professional demeanor showing cracks of genuine anger. He slid a thick folder across his desk. "Your husband hasn't just been planning to leave you. He's been documenting everything to build a case that would paint you as an unstable, controlling wife." The emails revealed Tom's strategy in chilling detail. He'd been saving screenshots of every text I'd sent asking about his whereabouts, Every voicemail where concern crept into my voice, every instance where I'd expressed hurt about his increasing absence. To an outside observer reading these communications without context, I looked like a jealous, paranoid spouse. But the manipulation went deeper. Tom had been deliberately provoking some of these reactions, coming home late without explanation, being vague about his schedule, then acting hurt when I expressed concern. He was manufacturing evidence of my unreasonable behavior while privately documenting it for future use in divorce proceedings. "Look at this email thread," Leon said, pointing to a particularly damning exchange between Tom and Helena from 6 months ago. "He's literally coaching her on how to interact with you to gather information." I read their correspondence with growing horror. Tom had been briefing Helena before every business meeting with my company, telling her which topics to probe, which questions to ask about our personal life, which vulnerabilities to exploit. My professional relationship with Morrison Industries had been a reconnaissance mission from the beginning. Helena had reported back to Tom about our conversations like a spy submitting intelligence reports. She'd noted my comments about wanting children, my concerns about Tom's long hours, my pride in building my business independently. Every personal detail I'd shared during what I thought were friendly professional interactions had been cataloged and analyzed for strategic advantage. But perhaps most devastating was discovering that Tom had been secretly recording our private conversations at home. Leon had found audio files on Tom's laptop, dozens of them, dating back over a year. Tom had been using his phone to capture our most intimate moments, our arguments about his absence, my attempts to discuss our relationship problems. "This is illegal in our state without your consent," Leon explained grimly, "but it shows the level of premeditation involved. He's been building a case against you while pretending to be your loving husband." Listening to those recordings was like experiencing psychological torture. There was my own voice, vulnerable and pleading, asking Tom if we could spend more time together, if he still loved me, if we could try counseling to work through our problems. And there was Tom's voice, so reasonable and patient, assuring me that I was imagining problems, that his work demands were temporary, that everything would get better soon. Knowing now that he was recording these conversations while actively planning to leave me for another woman made every gentle reassurance feel like a knife wound. He'd been documenting my pain while simultaneously causing it. The financial betrayals were equally systematic. Leon's forensic accountant had traced money movements that revealed Tom hadn't just been stealing from our joint accounts. He'd been deliberately sabotaging my business credit to limit my options in a divorce. "He's been making late payments on your business credit lines," the accountant explained during a conference call. "Never late enough to cause serious damage, but enough to lower your credit score and reduce your borrowing capacity. If you needed to refinance or expand during a divorce proceeding, you'd be in a significantly weakened position." Tom had also been redirecting client payments from my business into accounts I didn't know existed. Money that should have been deposited into Caldwell Events' operating account was being funneled through a shell company he'd created with Helena. They weren't just stealing my current assets, they were ensuring I'd struggle to rebuild after the divorce. The cruelest discovery came when Leon found emails between Tom and Helena discussing the timeline for my breakdown. They had been planning not just to divorce me, but to orchestrate circumstances that would make me appear emotionally unstable and potentially unfit to manage my own business affairs. "They've been discussing having you involuntarily committed for psychiatric evaluation," Leon said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Tom has been documenting what he calls erratic behavior, your perfectly normal responses to his gaslighting, and Helena has been researching the legal requirements for emergency mental health interventions." The scope of their conspiracy was breathtaking. They weren't just planning to take my husband, my money, and my family heirloom. They were planning to take my sanity, my business, and my freedom. Tom had been methodically constructing a narrative that would allow him to have me declared mentally incompetent, giving him control over all our assets while he started his new life with Helena. But the most shocking revelation came in Leon's final report. Tom and Helena had been planning this for nearly 2 years, since before their physical affair even began. The relationship had started as a professional alliance, two ambitious lawyers, discussing strategies for career advancement and personal wealth accumulation. "They've been documenting everything," Leon explained. "Your routines, your emotional patterns, your business practices, your social connections. This isn't a crime of passion that got out of hand. This is a long-term conspiracy to systematically dismantle your life and redistribute your assets to their benefit." Helena's pregnancy wasn't an accident that complicated their affair. It was a calculated decision designed to force the timeline of their plan. They needed a catalyst that would make Tom's departure seem emotionally justified rather than financially motivated. A pregnant mistress provided the perfect cover story for what was actually an elaborate theft scheme. The emails showed them discussing how to present the narrative to our social circle, our families, and potentially to the courts. Tom would be the devoted partner who tried to save his marriage to an increasingly unstable wife, but was ultimately forced to choose between his mental health and his unborn child. Helena would be the innocent colleague who found herself in an impossible situation, supporting a man through his wife's psychological decline. They'd even planned how to handle the business assets. Helena's family company would acquire Caldwell, events at a fraction of its worth during the divorce proceedings, citing my diminished capacity to run the business effectively. I would lose not just my marriage and my money, but the company I'd spent 15 years building. As I sat in Leon's office absorbing the full scope of their betrayal, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The hurt and confusion of the past months crystallized into something much more dangerous: absolute clarity about what needed to be done. Tom and Helena had made one fatal miscalculation in their elaborate scheme. They'd assumed I would react to their betrayal with the same emotional breakdown they'd been trying to manufacture. They expected me to crumble, to make desperate decisions that would validate their narrative about my mental instability. Instead, they'd given a master strategist months of advance warning and detailed intelligence about their plans. They'd handed me the blueprint for their own destruction. Tonight, at our anniversary dinner, Tom thought he was executing the final phase of his careful plot. In reality, he was walking into a trap that would expose every lie, every theft, every moment of calculated cruelty they'd inflicted on me. Some lessons about underestimating your opponent are taught publicly, and some revenge is best served exactly when your enemies think they've already won. The discovery that I wasn't the only victim of Tom and Helena's elaborate scheme came through an unexpected source: Mac Morrison, Helena's own younger brother, and the heir apparent to Morrison Industries. I first met Mac at a charity fundraiser I was coordinating for the Children's Hospital Foundation, an event that, ironically, Helena had specifically requested my company handle. He approached me during the cocktail reception, a tall man in his early 30s with the same honey-colored hair as his sister, but none of her calculated charm. "You're Grace Calloway," he said, extending his hand with a firm grip. "Helena speaks very highly of your work. I'm Mac Morrison." What struck me immediately was how different he seemed from the rest of the Morrison family. Where Helena projected polished perfection, Mac had a genuine warmth and an authenticity that felt refreshing. He seemed genuinely interested in the fundraiser's mission, asking detailed questions about the hospital's needs and the impact of our donor contributions. "Helena mentioned you've been handling several events for Morrison Industries," he said as we watched the auction proceedings. "I have to say, the transformation in our corporate giving strategy has been remarkable. Much more focused, much more strategic." Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. "You sound surprised by that." Mac hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Can I speak frankly? Helena's always been brilliant, but corporate philanthropy was never her passion. She's much more interested in other pursuits, I'm curious about who's really driving these new initiatives. The conversation might have ended there, just another networking exchange at a corporate event. But something in Mac's expression, a wariness that seemed at odds with his friendly demeanor, made me probe deeper. What kind of other pursuits? I asked casually. Let's just say Helena has always been very focused on advancement, both professional and personal. She tends to view relationships as strategic alliances rather than genuine connections. Over the following weeks, Mac and I developed a professional relationship that gradually became more personal. He started attending the planning meetings for Morrison Industries events, ostensibly to provide family perspective, but increasingly asking probing questions about my business operations and my relationship with his sister. It was Mac who first made me aware that something was seriously wrong with Morrison Industries' financial picture. "Grace, I need to ask you something confidential," he said during a private meeting at his downtown office 6 weeks ago. "Have you noticed anything unusual about the payments from Morrison Industries? Any irregularities in how they're processed? Or where they're sent?" I reviewed my records and discovered something troubling. While Morrison Industries was paying my invoices promptly, the payments were coming from a subsidiary account I'd never heard of, not from their main corporate treasury. When I mentioned this to Mac, his expression darkened. "I've been tracking some unusual financial activity," he admitted. "Helena has been moving significant amounts of money through subsidiary accounts without board approval. As a family member and board member, I have access to the records, and what I'm seeing doesn't make sense for legitimate business purposes." Mac's investigation had revealed that Helena was systematically embezzling from her own family's company, using her position as corporate counsel to create shell companies and redirect funds. But the amounts were far larger than what would be needed for personal expenses. They suggested she was funding something major. "I think she's planning to leave Morrison Industries," Mac said grimly, "but not before she's stolen enough capital to start her own venture. The question is whether she's working alone." When I mentioned Tom's name as Helena's colleague at Morrison, Keller and Associates, Mac's reaction was immediate and telling. "Tom Calloway? Helena talks about him constantly. At first I thought it was just professional admiration, but lately—" He paused, studying my face carefully. "Grace, I hope you won't take this the wrong way, but are you and Tom having any problems? Helena's been making some comments about your marriage that seemed oddly specific for someone who barely knows you personally." That conversation led to Mac and me comparing notes about our respective siblings' suspicious behavior. His evidence of Helena's financial crimes dovetailed perfectly with Leon's discoveries about Tom's asset manipulation. We realized that Tom and Helena weren't just having an affair. They were business partners in an elaborate fraud scheme targeting both our families. Mac became my most valuable ally, providing insider access to Morrison Industries' financial records and Helena's business communications. As a board member, he could authorize forensic audits and request detailed accounting that would have been impossible for me to obtain through Leon's investigation alone. "They've been planning this for almost 2 years, Mac revealed during one of our strategy sessions. "Helena started moving money around shortly after she joined Tom's law firm. I think meeting him gave her the legal expertise she needed to make her embezzlement scheme more sophisticated. But Mac brought more than just financial evidence to our alliance. As Helena's brother, he understood her psychological patterns, her weaknesses, and most importantly, her arrogance. Helena has always believed she's the smartest person in any room," Mac explained. "It's made her incredibly successful, but it's also made her careless. She assumes that everyone else is too stupid or too trusting to catch her schemes. That's going to be her downfall." Mac also provided crucial intelligence about Helena's timeline. Through family conversations and board meetings, he learned that Helena was planning to resign from Morrison Industries immediately after Tom's divorce was finalized. She intended to use the stolen funds to launch her own legal consulting firm, probably with Tom as her business partner. "She's been telling our parents that she's considering starting her own practice to have more flexibility for her growing family," Max said with disgust. They're actually proud of her entrepreneurial spirit. They have no idea she's planning to steal their life savings to fund her new venture. The final piece of Mac's contribution came when he volunteered to be my witness at tonight's confrontation. As Helena's brother and a board member of Morrison Industries, his presence would carry enormous weight in any legal proceedings that followed. "Helena needs to face consequences for what she's done to our family and to you," Mac said firmly. "I won't let her destroy Morrison Industries or hurt innocent people for her personal gain. Our grandfather built this company to help people, not to fund my sister's criminal enterprises." Through Mac, I also learned that Helena had been systematically alienating herself from other family members with her increasingly demanding and manipulative behavior. Her parents were beginning to question some of her business decisions, and several cousins who worked in the company had complained about her authoritarian management style. "You won't be destroying a loving family," Mac assured me. "You'll be exposing someone who's already damaged our family relationships for her own benefit. Helena made her choices. Now she needs to face the consequences." Arthur Blackwood, my divorce attorney, was our third crucial ally. Unlike Leon and Mac, Arthur brought legal expertise and professional connections that would be essential for ensuring Tom and Helena faced both civil and criminal penalties for their actions. What they've done isn't just grounds for divorce, Arthur explained during our final strategy meeting. It's criminal fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. You're not just ending a marriage, you're exposing a complex financial crime that's hurt multiple victims. Arthur had coordinated with federal investigators who specialized in white-collar crime, ensuring that tonight's confrontation would provide the evidence needed for criminal prosecution. He'd also prepared civil lawsuits that would allow both Mac and me to recover our stolen assets and seek punitive damages. The three of us had spent weeks planning tonight's events with the precision of a military operation. Every detail had been considered, every contingency planned for, every piece of evidence carefully organized for maximum impact. As I sat in that restaurant watching Tom and Helena perform their charade of professional collegiality, I felt the strength that comes from knowing you're not fighting alone. Leon had provided the intelligence, Mac had provided the insider access, and Arthur had provided the legal framework. Together, we'd built a case that would ensure Tom and Helena's betrayal, would cost them everything they'd tried to steal and more. Some battles are won through individual courage. Others require the strategic alliance of people who refuse to let evil triumph. Tonight, justice would be a team effort. The final pieces of Tom and Helena's conspiracy came together in the last 2 weeks before our anniversary dinner, when Arthur's legal connections and Mac's corporate access revealed the true magnitude of their crimes. What we discovered went far beyond a simple affair and embezzlement scheme. It was a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had been targeting multiple victims for nearly 2 years. Arthur's contact at the FBI's white-collar crime division had been quietly investigating Morrison, Keller, and Associates for suspicious financial activity that had nothing to do with Tom and Helena initially. But when Arthur shared our evidence, Agent Sarah Winters realized that Tom and Helena were at the center of a much larger fraud network. "Your husband and Ms. Morrison aren't just stealing from you and her family," Agent Winters explained during a confidential meeting in Arthur's office. "They've been using their legal positions to facilitate fraud for other clients, taking a percentage of stolen assets in exchange for legal cover." The scope was staggering. Tom had been using his position at Morrison, Keller, and Associates to help wealthy clients hide assets during divorce proceedings, charging premium fees for his expertise in asset concealment. Helena had been providing corporate legal services to help business owners embezzle from their own companies, creating complex paper trails that made the theft nearly impossible to trace. Together, they'd built a criminal consulting practice within their legitimate legal careers, stealing millions of dollars while maintaining the facade of respected attorneys. My marriage in Morrison Industries had been their testing ground, the place where they perfected techniques they later sold to other criminals. "They've been running what's essentially a criminal law firm," Agent Winters continued. Tom specializes in matrimonial fraud. Helena focuses on corporate embezzlement, and together they've helped dozens of clients steal money while avoiding prosecution. The FBI had been tracking unusual money movements between shell companies, offshore accounts, and legal trust funds for months without understanding the connection. Our evidence provided the missing link that tied everything together. Tom and Helena were the common thread linking dozens of seemingly unrelated financial crimes. Mac's access to Morrison Industries' complete financial records revealed even more devastating details. Helena hadn't just been stealing money, she'd been using her family's company as a money laundering operation for their criminal clients. She's been moving dirty money through Morrison Industries' legitimate business transactions, Mac explained, his voice tight with anger. Client payments, vendor invoices, charitable donations. All of it has been contaminated with funds from her criminal network. Our family company has been unknowingly facilitating financial crimes for almost 2 years. The money laundering operation was sophisticated and nearly undetectable. Helena would receive payments from criminal clients into shell companies, then transfer those funds through a series of Morrison Industries transactions before they emerged as clean money in accounts she controlled with Tom. The family textile business had become a front for washing millions of dollars in stolen assets. But perhaps most shocking was the discovery that Helena's pregnancy was part of their long-term criminal strategy. Agent Winters showed us communications where Tom and Helena discussed the advantages of having a child together as protection against prosecution. Pregnant women and new mothers receive more lenient treatment in the criminal justice system, Agent Winters explained. They were planning to use the baby as a shield against serious jail time if they were ever caught. Helena's pregnancy wasn't just about their personal relationship. It was a calculated legal strategy. The timeline of their crimes revealed a pattern of escalating ambition and decreasing caution. They'd started small, with Tom helping a few clients hide assets during divorces and Helena creating simple embezzlement schemes for business owners. But success had made them arrogant, leading them to take bigger risks and target larger amounts of money. My marriage had become their proving ground for the most sophisticated techniques. The systematic documentation of my supposed mental instability, the complex asset transfers, the elaborate gaslighting campaign, all of it had been rehearsal for schemes they were planning to sell to other criminal clients. They were planning to franchise their operation, Arthur revealed after reviewing communications the FBI had intercepted. Tom was going to start a specialized practice focused on high-conflict divorces, essentially advertising his ability to help wealthy spouses steal assets from their partners. Helena was going to launch a corporate consulting firm that would help business owners embezzle from their own companies. The financial evidence showed they'd already stolen over $3 million from various victims, with my losses and Morrison Industries' losses representing only a fraction of their total criminal activity. They had accounts in 4 different countries, property holdings in false names, and a network of criminal associates spanning multiple states. Most disturbing was the discovery that they'd been building detailed psychological profiles of all their targets, using the same manipulation techniques on dozens of victims that they'd perfected on me. Women across the country had been gaslighted, financially abused, and systematically robbed by men working with Tom's network. Your husband has been training other lawyers in what he calls strategic matrimonial dissolution, Agent Winters said, showing me training materials Tom had created. He's literally teaching other attorneys how to psychologically abuse wives while stealing their assets. The training materials were horrifying in their clinical precision. Tom had reduced the destruction of marriages to a series of strategic steps, complete with psychological manipulation techniques and legal loopholes that would protect the perpetrators. He'd turned the systematic abuse of trusting women into a teachable methodology. Helena's corporate fraud training was equally sophisticated. She'd created step-by-step guides for embezzling from family businesses, pension funds, and charitable organizations while maintaining plausible deniability. Her techniques had been used to steal retirement savings from working-class families and operational funds from nonprofit organizations serving vulnerable populations. The scope of their victims was vast and heartbreaking. Elderly couples who'd lost their retirement savings to business partners using Helena's techniques, military wives whose deployments had been exploited by husbands trained in Tom's methods, small business owners who discovered too late that their trusted attorneys were systematically robbing them. But the most chilling discovery came in the final FBI briefing, when Agent Winters revealed that Tom and Helena had been planning to expand internationally. They were in negotiations with criminal organizations in Europe and South America, she explained. The plan was to provide legal consulting services to international money laundering operations, using their experience with domestic financial crimes to help foreign criminals move assets into the United States. My marriage hadn't just been the victim of their greed, it had been the laboratory where they developed techniques that were about to be sold to international criminals. The woman I'd thought was my husband's mistress was actually his partner in a criminal enterprise that threatened the financial security of innocent people around the world. As I absorbed the full scope of their crimes, I realized that tonight's confrontation wasn't just about reclaiming my stolen assets or exposing my husband's betrayal. It was about stopping a criminal network that had been destroying lives with methodical precision. Tom and Helena had built their empire on the assumption that their victims would be too hurt, too ashamed, or too broken to fight back effectively. They'd counted on the isolation and emotional devastation of betrayal to protect them from consequences. They'd made one fatal miscalculation. They'd chosen the wrong woman to destroy. Tonight, their criminal empire would begin to crumble. One public exposure at a time. With the full scope of Tom and Helena's criminal enterprise exposed, the final 2 weeks before our anniversary dinner became an intensive period of strategic coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies, legal teams, and financial institutions. What we were planning wasn't just a confrontation. It was a carefully orchestrated takedown of an international criminal network. Agent Winters had assembled a task force that included FBI financial crime specialists, IRS criminal investigators, and international law enforcement liaisons. The evidence we'd provided had triggered investigations in 6 countries and led to the freezing of accounts in 12 different financial institutions. We need this confrontation to happen exactly as planned, Agent Winters explained during our final strategy meeting. Tom and Helena don't know we're onto them yet, which gives us a unique opportunity to catch them in the act of executing their plans while gathering evidence that will be admissible in court. The restaurant confrontation would serve multiple purposes beyond my personal need for justice. It would provide documented evidence of their conspiracy, force them to make incriminating statements while under surveillance, and most importantly, trigger a series of predetermined legal actions that would freeze their assets and arrest their criminal associates simultaneously. Arthur had coordinated with federal prosecutors to ensure that every aspect of tonight's events would contribute to the larger criminal case. The restaurant had been equipped with recording devices. Plainclothes federal agents would be positioned throughout the dining room, and every word of the confrontation would be captured for use in prosecution. Your role tonight is crucial, Arthur emphasized. You're not just confronting your husband, you're serving as an undercover operative, helping to expose a major criminal conspiracy. Everything you say and do needs to support the larger investigation. Mac's contribution to the strategic planning was equally important. As Helena's brother and a board member of Morrison Industries, he had the authority to make immediate decisions that would protect his family's company from further damage while supporting the federal investigation. I've already prepared emergency board resolutions that will remove Helena from all corporate positions and freeze her access to company accounts, Mac explained. The moment she incriminates herself tonight, I'll execute those resolutions and turn over complete corporate cooperation to the FBI. But the strategic planning went beyond the immediate confrontation. We were coordinating a complex series of legal actions that would unfold simultaneously across multiple jurisdictions once Tom and Helena were arrested. The FBI had identified 47 potential victims of their criminal network, and federal agents were prepared to conduct interviews and gather evidence from each of them. Search. Warrants had been prepared for Tom and Helena's homes, offices, and known safe deposit boxes. International law enforcement agencies were ready to freeze offshore accounts and seize property holdings in false names. This is the largest matrimonial fraud investigation in federal history, Agent Winters told us with evident satisfaction. Tom and Helena's network has been operating for nearly 3 years, and we estimate they've stolen over $15 million from victims across 14 states and 6 countries. My own preparation for the confrontation required careful psychological planning as well as legal strategy. I had to maintain my cover as the unsuspecting wife while gathering evidence and making statements that would support criminal prosecution. It was a delicate balance between authentic emotional response and strategic intelligence gathering. Remember that Tom and Helena still think they're in control, Arthur advised. They believe they've successfully manipulated you and that tonight represents their final victory. Use their overconfidence against them. Let them reveal their plans. Let them incriminate themselves. Let them think they're winning right up until the moment we arrest them. The timing of various elements had to be precisely coordinated. Federal agents would be monitoring communications between Tom and Helena's criminal associates, ready to make arrests the moment our confrontation began. International law enforcement would simultaneously raid properties and freeze accounts based on evidence we'd provided. We're not just stopping Tom and Helena, Agent Winters explained. We're dismantling an entire criminal network that's been operating across international borders. Tonight's confrontation will trigger the largest coordinated law enforcement action against matrimonial fraud in history. But perhaps the most important aspect of our strategic planning involved protecting me from potential retaliation. Tom and Helena's criminal network included dangerous individuals who might attempt to silence witnesses or intimidate victims. Federal marshals would be providing protection for me and Mac immediately after the arrests, and witness protection protocols were in place if needed. Once we arrest Tom and Helena, you'll become the star witness in a major federal prosecution, Arthur warned. That comes with both opportunities for justice and potential risks to your safety. We've planned for every contingency. The financial recovery strategy was equally complex. Forensic accountants had traced assets to dozens of different accounts, and investment vehicles and legal mechanisms were in place to begin recovering stolen funds immediately after the arrests. Civil forfeiture actions would allow authorities to seize criminally obtained assets even before criminal trials were completed. We expect to recover approximately 80% of the stolen assets, the lead forensic accountant explained. Tom and Helena were sophisticated criminals, but they were also arrogant. They kept detailed records that will make asset recovery much easier than usual in cases like this. The psychological warfare aspect of our strategy was perhaps the most crucial element. Tom and Helena had built their entire criminal enterprise on their ability to manipulate and control their victims through emotional abuse and psychological intimidation. Tonight, I would turn those same weapons against them. They expect you to be broken, defeated, and emotionally unstable, the FBI's behavioral analyst explained. Instead, you'll be calm, controlled, and strategically focused. The reversal of their expectations will destabilize them and make them more likely to make mistakes. Every detail of the evening had been planned to maximize psychological impact while gathering evidence. The emerald necklace would serve as both a personal symbol and physical evidence of theft. Helena's pregnancy would become evidence of their calculated manipulation rather than romantic commitment. Tom's professional reputation would crumble in front of his colleagues and social peers. By the end of tonight, Agent Winters predicted, Tom and Helena will realize that their victims were smarter, stronger, and more resourceful than they ever imagined. Their arrogance will have become the instrument of their own destruction. As I prepared for what would be the most important performance of my life. I felt the weight of responsibility for all the victims who couldn't fight back, all the women who'd been destroyed by Tom's network, all the families who'd lost everything, to Helena's schemes. Tonight wasn't just about my personal justice. It was about sending a message to every criminal who preys on trust, love, and vulnerability. Some victims refuse to stay broken, and some betrayals come with consequences that destroy the perpetrators more completely than they ever imagined. Possible. The final phase of our strategy was about to begin, and Tom and Helena had no idea that their carefully planned victory celebration was actually their execution. The morning of our anniversary dinner, I woke up in the guest bedroom of Mac's downtown penthouse, where I'd been staying for the past week under FBI protection. Agent Winters had insisted on the relocation after intercepting communications, suggesting that Tom and Helena were becoming suspicious about potential surveillance. "Today's the day," Mac said over breakfast, his usual easy demeanor replaced by the focused intensity of a man preparing for battle. "Helena called me last night asking strange questions about Morrison Industries' legal liability insurance and emergency board procedures. I think she suspects something." The final 24 hours had been a whirlwind of last-minute preparations and growing tension. Tom had been making unusual moves that suggested he might be accelerating his timeline. He'd transferred additional funds out of our joint accounts, made several encrypted calls to unknown numbers, and, most tellingly, had purchased one-way airline tickets to a non-extradition country for the day after our anniversary. "They're planning to run," Agent Winters confirmed during our final briefing. "We intercepted communications between Helena and a contact in the Cayman Islands discussing expedited passport services. Whatever they're planning for tonight, they think it's their last move before disappearing permanently." The pressure of knowing that this was literally our only chance to stop them added weight to every detail of the evening's preparation. If Tom and Helena escaped, they would continue their criminal enterprise from a country where we couldn't touch them, destroying more lives while living off the millions they'd already stolen. Arthur arrived at Mac's apartment with a briefcase, full of legal documents that would be executed the moment Tom and Helena were arrested. Divorce papers, asset seizure orders, criminal complaints, and civil lawsuits. An entire legal arsenal designed to ensure they could never recover from tonight's exposure. "I've been practicing law for 28 years, Arthur said grimly. "And I've never seen a case where the stakes were this high. We're not just seeking justice for you and Mac. We're potentially saving dozens of future victims from financial and emotional destruction." My preparation for the evening required both practical and psychological elements. The black cocktail dress I'd chosen was elegant but understated, designed to project confidence without seeming threatening. My grandmother's emerald earrings, the only pieces of her jewelry collection Tom hadn't stolen, would serve as a visual reminder of what I was fighting to reclaim. But the most important preparation was mental. I spent 2 hours with the FBI's behavioral psychologist, rehearsing responses to various scenarios Tom and Helena might attempt. They would likely try to gaslight me, manipulate my emotions, or even attempt to paint me as mentally unstable in front of witnesses. "Remember that everything they say to you tonight will be calculated to provoke an emotional reaction," Dr. Sarah Martinez explained. "They want you to appear irrational, jealous, or vindictive. Your job is to remain calm, factual, and focused on exposing their crimes rather than responding to their personal attacks." The technical preparations were equally crucial. I would be wearing a sophisticated recording device that looked like an expensive brooch, and my purse contained a backup recording system. Federal agents positioned throughout the restaurant would be monitoring everything through multiple channels. "The recording equipment is virtually undetectable," the FBI technician assured me. "But more importantly, it's been legally approved for use in criminal prosecution. Everything Tom and Helena say tonight will be admissible evidence in federal court." Mac's role required him to balance multiple competing interests: protecting his family's company, supporting the federal investigation, and maintaining his cover as Helena's unsuspecting brother until the moment of confrontation. His preparation involved memorizing legal documents and corporate resolutions that would be executed in real time as events unfolded. The hardest part will be sitting at that table watching Helena manipulate and lie, while knowing what she's really done to our family, Mac admitted. But I keep thinking about all the other victims of their crimes. Tonight isn't just about stopping Helena. It's about stopping everyone she and Tom have trained to prey on innocent people. Agent Winters conducted a final equipment check and briefing on emergency protocols. Federal agents would be positioned as restaurant staff, diners at nearby tables, and security personnel. If Tom and Helena attempted to flee or became violent, the response would be immediate and overwhelming. We're treating this as a high-risk operation, Agent Winters explained. Tom and Helena are desperate criminals who know they're facing life, in prison if caught. We've planned for every contingency, including the possibility that they might attempt to harm you or Mac to prevent exposure. The financial preparation was equally complex. The moment Tom and Helena were arrested, a series of account freezes and asset seizures would be triggered across multiple jurisdictions. Recovery specialists were standing by to begin tracing and recovering stolen funds from dozens of different hiding places. By tomorrow morning, every penny they've stolen will be frozen or seized, the lead forensic accountant promised. They'll wake up in federal custody with no access to the fortune they've built on other people's suffering. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself experiencing an unexpected sense of calm. The months of investigation, planning, and preparation had led to this moment, and I felt ready for whatever Tom and Helena might attempt. The scared, confused woman who had found Helena's earring in Tom's study was gone, replaced by someone who understood exactly what needed to be done. My final preparation was personal rather than professional. I spent an hour looking through old photos of my grandmother Vivian, remembering her stories about the strength of Caldwell women and the legacy represented by the emerald necklace Helena was wearing tonight. You taught me that some battles are worth fighting no matter the cost, I whispered to her picture. Tonight I'm going to prove myself worthy of the legacy you left me. As evening approached, I dressed carefully in the black cocktail dress and emerald earrings, applied makeup with hands that were steady and sure, and looked in the mirror at a woman who was ready to face her enemies. Tom and Helena thought they were going to a celebration dinner where they would humiliate me one final time before disappearing with their stolen fortune. Instead, they were walking into a trap that would expose their crimes to the world and ensure they spent the rest of their lives paying for the damage they'd caused. The naive wife who had trusted her husband's lies was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who had learned that sometimes the only way to stop evil is to meet it head-on, armed with truth, surrounded by allies, and absolutely determined to see justice done. Tonight, Tom and Helena would discover that they had underestimated their victim in the most catastrophic way possible. The final act was about to begin. The moment had arrived. I stood at the entrance of Meridian Heights restaurant, watching Tom and Helena through the floor-to-ceiling windows as they sat at our usual anniversary table, completely unaware that their world was about to implode. Helena's hand rested protectively over her pregnant belly while Tom poured wine with the confident smile of a man who believed he'd successfully orchestrated the perfect crime. Arthur was already seated at table 12, briefcase positioned beside his chair, federal agents disguised as diners at strategic positions throughout the restaurant. Mac had arrived 15 minutes earlier and was nursing a whiskey at the bar, his eyes locked on his sister with an expression of controlled disgust. Final equipment check, Agent Winters whispered through my earpiece. We're recording everything, and backup teams are in position. Remember, stay calm, let them incriminate themselves, and trust that we'll handle the rest. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my grandmother's emerald earrings and the solidarity of everyone who had worked to make this moment possible. Then I walked into the restaurant like a woman heading to her execution, knowing that by the end of the evening, it would be Tom and Helena facing destruction. Marcus, the maître d', greeted me with professional warmth, though I caught the flicker of sympathy in his eyes. He knew what anniversary dinner meant to me, and seeing me arrive alone while my husband dined with another woman must have seemed like the height of humiliation. Mrs. Calloway, he said gently. Your usual table is occupied this evening. Perhaps I could seat you. Actually, Marcus, I think I'll join my husband, I said clearly, my voice carrying just enough to reach nearby tables. It is our anniversary, after all. The walk across the restaurant felt both eternal and instantaneous. Conversations quieted as I passed, the Meridian Heights crowd recognizing the drama unfolding before them. Tom's back was to me, but Helena saw me approaching, and her face went through a fascinating series of expressions: surprise, panic, and then a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Grace! Tom's voice carried that false heartiness I'd learned to despise as he turned to see me approaching. What a surprise! Helena and I were just discussing the Morrison Industries event planning. I settled into the empty chair at their table without invitation, noting how Helena's hand instinctively moved to cover her belly and how Tom's grip tightened on his wine glass. How thoughtful of you to work on our anniversary, I said pleasantly, making eye contact with both of them. Though I have to say, Helena, you're glowing tonight. Pregnancy suits you beautifully. The silence that followed was electric. Tom's politician's smile faltered, and Helena's careful composure cracked slightly. I'm sorry? Helena managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The baby, I continued, maintaining perfect calm while watching their reactions. You're about 5 months along, aren't you? Congratulations to you both. Tom's legal training kicked in, and he attempted damage control. Grace, I think there's been some misunderstanding. Oh, I don't think so, I interrupted gently. I think everything is perfectly clear. In fact, I have something that belongs to you, Helena. I reached into my purse and withdrew a small velvet jewelry box, placing it on the table between us. Helena's eyes widened as she recognized what it contained. Your earring, I said simply. The Mikimoto pearl you left in my husband's study 3 months ago. I've been meaning to return it. The blood drained from Helena's face as I opened the box to reveal the distinctive cultured pearl earring. Tom's lawyer instincts were screaming. Warnings, but his arrogance wouldn't let him retreat. That could belong to anyone, he said dismissively. Grace, you're embarrassing yourself. You're right, it could, I agreed pleasantly. Just like the bracelet you bought for Helena could have been for anyone. Just like the hotel room you've been sharing twice a week could be for business meetings. Just like the joint bank accounts you opened could be for legitimate purposes. With each revelation, I watched their confidence crumble. Helena's hand shook as she reached for her water glass, and Tom's face had gone from confident to calculating to genuinely worried. But what really convinced me, I continued, my voice carrying clearly to nearby tables, was the apartment lease on 5th Street. The one in both your names. The one you've been furnishing for your new life together. Grace, Tom began, but I wasn't finished. And of course, there's my grandmother's emerald necklace. I looked directly at the antique jewelry glittering at Helena's throat. The one you convinced me to let you store in your office safe for security. The one with the inscription, To Isabella, my emerald heart, 1918, on the clasp. Helena's hand flew to her throat, fingers touching the necklace as if she'd forgotten she was wearing it. That's impossible, she whispered. Tom said it was a gift from his grandmother. Did he? I smiled, feeling the strength of 4 generations of Caldwell women flowing through me. How interesting, because Tom's grandmother died when he was 12, and her jewelry collection was costume pieces from department stores. This necklace, however, has been in my family for over a century. Conversation was drawing attention from other diners, but I was past caring about social propriety. Tom and Helena had made their choice to humiliate me publicly. Now they would face the consequences publicly. Furthermore, I continued, reaching into my purse for Leon's investigation folder, I find it fascinating that you two have been planning this pregnancy for months. The fertility tracking, the prenatal vitamins, the discussions about names, all documented in your email correspondence." Tom's face had gone white. "How did you get access to your emails?" I finished. "Oh, Tom, you always underestimated me. You thought I was just a naive little wife who would accept whatever lies you fed her. But you see, I've been investigating your affair for months." I placed photographs on the table, images of them entering hotels, sharing intimate dinners, apartment hunting together. Each photo hit the table like a playing card, building an undeniable case of their betrayal. "I know about the money you've stolen from our joint accounts," I continued relentlessly. "I know about the business credit you've damaged. I know about Morrison Industries funds being redirected to your personal accounts. I know about the clients you've been helping to commit fraud. I know about everything." Helena was crying now, tears streaming down her face as the full scope of their exposure became clear. Tom's lawyer brain was frantically calculating options, looking for escape routes that didn't exist. "Most importantly," I said, standing from the table and looking down at them both, "I know that everything you've done tonight has been recorded by federal agents, and that tomorrow morning you'll both be waking up in jail cells facing charges for conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering." That's when Arthur stood up from table 12, briefcase in hand, and began walking toward us. That's when Mac pushed back from the bar and started across the restaurant. That's when federal agents positioned throughout the dining room began converging on our table. "Thomas Calloway and Helena Morrison," Arthur announced in a voice that carried throughout the restaurant. "You are under arrest for federal charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and racketeering." The restaurant erupted into chaos as handcuffs appeared and Miranda rights were read. But through it all, I stood perfectly calm, watching the destruction of the two people who had tried to destroy me. Justice, it turned out, was best served in front of an audience. The chaos that erupted in Meridian Heights restaurant was immediate and devastating. Federal agents emerged from their positions throughout the dining room like pieces of an elaborate chess game reaching checkmate. Tom and Helena's expressions shifted from confusion to horror to desperate calculation as the handcuffs clicked into place. "This is ridiculous," Tom shouted, his lawyer instincts finally kicking in as Agent Winters read him his rights. "I demand to speak to my attorney. This is harassment." But Helena's response was more telling. She turned to her brother Mac with tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking with desperation. "Mac, please, you have to help me. Think about the baby. Think about our family." Mac's face was stone as he approached the table where his sister sat in handcuffs. "I am thinking about our family, Helena. I'm thinking about the company our grandfather built, the employees whose pension funds you've been stealing, and all the victims of your crimes." He pulled out his phone and speed-dialed the Morrison Industries board chairman. "Emergency board meeting in 1 hour," he said curtly. "Helena Morrison is being arrested for embezzlement and fraud. I'm invoking the emergency succession protocols immediately." The restaurant's other diners watched in fascination as this real-life drama unfolded before them. Several people were discreetly recording on their phones, ensuring that Tom and Helena's public humiliation would be preserved for posterity. The Meridian Heights crowd would be talking about this anniversary dinner for years to come. "You can't do this," Helena sobbed as the federal agents prepared to escort her out. "I'm pregnant. You can't arrest a pregnant woman." "Actually, we can," Agent Winters replied professionally. "Pregnancy doesn't provide immunity from federal crimes. You'll receive appropriate medical care while in custody." Tom's desperation manifested differently. As the reality of his situation sank in, he turned to me with the kind of manipulative pleading I'd become expert at recognizing. "Grace, please," he said, his voice cracking with false emotion. "Think about what we meant to each other. 10 years. Of marriage has to count for something. We can work this out. I'll give you everything. The house, the business, whatever you want." I looked at the man I'd once loved, now revealed as a criminal willing to say anything to save himself. and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "Tom," I said quietly, leaning close enough that only he could hear. "You already gave me everything I wanted. You gave me the evidence I needed to destroy you completely." As the federal agents led them toward the restaurant's exit, Helena made one final desperate play. She suddenly doubled over, clutching her stomach and crying out in apparent pain. "The baby!" she gasped. "Something's wrong with the baby." For a moment, the procession stopped as agents called for medical assistance. But I noticed something the others missed. Helena's eyes darting toward the restaurant's back exit, calculating whether this medical emergency might provide an escape opportunity. "Interesting acting, Helena," I called out clearly. "But federal agents aren't as easily manipulated as your previous victims. And that medical team that's coming? They're federal medical personnel who are trained to distinguish between real emergencies and fake ones." Her performance faltered immediately, confirming that it had been an act. The federal agents resumed escorting them out, now with additional security to prevent any further escape attempts. As Tom and Helena disappeared through the restaurant's exit doors, I remained standing at the table where they'd planned to humiliate me, surrounded by the evidence of their crimes and the support of everyone who'd helped bring them to justice. The immediate aftermath was swift and comprehensive. Arthur was already on his phone executing the legal documents that would freeze their assets and begin recovery proceedings. Mac was coordinating with the Morrison Industries Board to protect the company from further damage. Agent Winters was briefing the media team that would ensure the story of their arrest reached the public in a way that might help other victims come forward. In the span of 15 minutes, Tom and Helena had gone from confident criminals celebrating their final victory to federal prisoners facing decades in prison. Some anniversary gifts, I reflected, are worth waiting 10 years to deliver. 18 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my restored Victorian home, now mine alone, thanks to the divorce settlement, preparing dinner for Mac and Arthur, who had become not just allies, but genuine friends. The morning newspaper lay, open on the counter, its headline reading, "Callaway Morrison Fraud Network, Final Convictions Handed Down." Tom had received 25 years in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering. Helena got 18 years, with her pregnancy, providing minimal leniency given the calculated nature of her crimes. Their criminal network had been completely dismantled, with over 40 co-conspirators facing various sentences across multiple states and countries. Most importantly, we'd recovered nearly 90% of the stolen assets. The money had been returned to victims, from elderly couples who'd lost their retirement savings to military families whose deployments had been exploited. Morrison Industries had not only survived Helena's embezzlement, but had thrived under Mac's leadership, implementing new oversight procedures that became a model for other family businesses. My emerald necklace hung around my neck where it belonged, its weight a constant reminder of the strength that had carried 4 generations of Caldwell women through their darkest moments. I'd worn it to every court hearing, every deposition, every moment when Tom and Helena's lawyers had tried to paint me as the vindictive ex-wife rather than the victim of their elaborate crimes. Caldwell events had exploded in popularity after the trial. Apparently, clients found my story inspiring, and my reputation for meticulous attention to detail and strategic thinking had attracted a waiting list of corporations wanting to work with the woman who'd single-handedly exposed an international criminal network. I'd had to hire 6 new employees and move into a larger office space. "Grace," Mac called from the dining room, where he was setting the table with Arthur. "The wine is perfect, but I think you should see the news." I walked into the living room to find them watching a special report about matrimonial fraud prevention programs being implemented across the country. The anchor was explaining how the Callaway Morrison case had led to new federal legislation, requiring disclosure of certain financial activities during divorce proceedings. "They're calling it the Grace Callaway Protection Act," Arthur said with obvious pride. "Your case has literally changed how the legal system handles matrimonial fraud." The irony wasn't lost on me. Tom's systematic documentation of his crimes, originally intended to be used against me, had provided prosecutors with the most comprehensive evidence of matrimonial fraud in legal history. His arrogance had become the foundation for protecting future victims, but perhaps the most satisfying development had been unexpected. 6 months after the trial, I'd received a call from Agent Winters informing me that my case had inspired dozens of women to come forward with their own stories of financial and emotional abuse. The FBI had established a special task force dedicated to investigating matrimonial fraud, using the techniques we'd developed to help other victims fight back. "You know what the best part is?" Mac said, raising his wine glass. "Helena actually thought she was the smart one in the family. She used to tell me I was too sentimental about business, too trusting of people's good intentions. Turns out, those qualities are exactly what saved Morrison Industries and helped us do the right thing." As we sat down to dinner, I thought about the scared woman who had found Helena's earring in Tom's study almost 2 years ago. That woman had believed her worth was tied to her marriage, her success dependent on her husband's approval, her future limited by his ambitions. The woman sitting at this table had learned something different. That strength isn't given by others. It's discovered within yourself. That justice isn't handed down from above. It's fought for and won through determination and strategic thinking. That the greatest revenge against those who try to destroy you is to rebuild yourself into something they could never have imagined. Tom had wanted a weak wife who would disappear quietly when he discarded her. Instead, he'd created an opponent who dismantled his entire criminal empire and ensured he'd spend the best years of his life in federal prison. Some lessons about underestimating women are taught publicly, permanently, and at the highest possible cost. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and I raised my glass to toast the future. A future built on truth, surrounded by people who valued justice, and anchored by the unbreakable legacy of women who refused to be defeated. Happy anniversary to me, indeed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.